Frontier Medical Station Kepler-7 hung in orbit like a promise of cooperation, its modular design reflecting both human engineering pragmatism and Velari aesthetic sensibilities. Dr. Marcus Webb stood at the observation window of his laboratory, watching the moon below rotate through phases that painted its resource-rich surface in shifting shades of silver and blue. 3 years he'd been stationed here, 3 years since he'd left Earth, and the memories of family lost to Velari kinetic strikes during the colony wars. Dr. Webb, I have questions about your cardiovascular redundancy. Marcus turned to find researcher Lissa emerging from the specimen storage area, her arms full of sample containers and her long ears tilted forward with the intensity he'd come to associate with her endless curiosity. She was tall even by Velari standards, with skin that caught the laboratory's lighting in subtle iridescent patterns, and those expressive ears that broadcast her emotional state to anyone who learned to read them. Good morning to you too, Lissa. Yes, greetings, pleasantries, appropriate acknowledgement of temporal context. She set the containers down with careful precision. Now, cardiovascular redundancy. Humans have multiple blood vessels performing similar functions. This seems inefficient. Why did your evolution not streamline the system? Marcus had been answering Lissa's questions for 6 months now, ever since she'd been assigned as his primary student in the medical exchange program. Her approach to learning involved asking approximately 700 questions per day, most of them thoughtful, some of them uncomfortable, all of them delivered with the social awareness of a hyperactive graduate student who'd never learned about personal boundaries. Redundancy provides backup systems, Marcus explained, pulling up a holographic model of human circulation. If one blood vessel is damaged, others can compensate. It's evolutionary insurance against injury. But Velari vessels regenerate within hours. Damage is temporary. Your approach seems to assume permanent damage is common. In human evolution, it was. We evolved as persistence hunters on a dangerous planet. Redundancy kept us alive long enough to reproduce. Lissa's ears perked up at the word reproduce, a reaction Marcus had learned meant she just identified a new topic for exhaustive inquiry. He preemptively tried to redirect. Should we review the respiratory comparison studies? You had questions about oxygen processing. Later, I am now curious about human reproduction. Our briefing materials on the topic were marked as incomplete and possibly inaccurate. She tilted her head, studying him with unsettling directness. You are qualified to provide accurate information, yes. Marcus suppressed a sigh. He'd known this topic would come up eventually. The Velari approach to reproduction was so fundamentally different from human biology that mutual understanding required someone willing to explain the awkward details. Yes, I'm qualified. Though maybe we should schedule a formal lecture with proper materials. No need for formality. We are colleagues. You can explain informally. She pulled up a chair with her characteristic lack of patience for procedural delays. I will ask questions as they occur to me. That was what Marcus was afraid of. But this was his job, building bridges through education, helping two species understand each other despite decades of war and mistrust. If that meant uncomfortable conversations about reproductive biology, so be it. All right, what do you know already? Humans require 2 individuals of different biological configurations to create offspring. This is similar to Velari reproduction in requiring multiple genetic contributors, but different in execution. Velari reproduction involves neural bonding and conscious genetic merging. Human reproduction involves. She consulted her datapad, physical interaction of anatomical components. The details in our briefing materials were confusing and possibly metaphorical. Not metaphorical, literal. Marcus pulled up anatomical diagrams, keeping everything clinical and professional. Human reproduction is biological rather than neurological. It requires physical contact between individuals with complementary reproductive anatomy. Physical contact. Lissa's ears tilted at slightly different angles, processing this information. Not neural connection. No, though emotional connection is typically involved in human relationships, the reproductive process itself is biological and physical. This seems inefficient. How do you ensure genetic compatibility without neural analysis? We don't, not directly. Humans evolved mate selection based on other factors, health indicators, social compatibility, emotional bonding. Genetic compatibility is mostly chance. Lissa looked genuinely disturbed by this information. Chance. You entrust reproduction to random probability. Evolution entrusts it to probability. Modern humans have genetic screening available, but the biological process remains the same as it was for our pre-technological ancestors. For the next hour, Marcus walked Lissa through the basics of human reproductive biology, using the same clinical approach he'd learned in medical school. She asked detailed questions about mechanics, timing, hormonal cycles, gestation periods. Her focus was intense, her questions probing but not prurient. She approached the topic like she approached everything, as a puzzle to be understood through systematic inquiry. Other Velari researchers worked in the laboratory, conducting their own experiments at stations scattered across the large space. Marcus was peripherally aware of them, but his focus remained on making sure Lissa understood concepts that had no direct parallel in Velari experience. So the physical contact is instinctive, Lissa asked. Humans do not consciously control the process. Parts of it are instinctive, yes, but humans also have social and cultural frameworks around reproduction. It's not purely biological. There's courtship, relationship building, emotional connection that typically precedes physical intimacy. Courtship, Lissa tested the word. This is the process of determining compatibility before attempting reproduction. Essentially, yes. Though humans can form relationships without intention to reproduce, the emotional bonding is often valued for its own sake. Fascinating. Velari bonding is always tied to genetic merging. Your species separates emotional connection from reproductive function. Not entirely separated. Most humans prefer reproduction within emotionally significant relationships. But yes, they're not automatically linked the way they seem to be for your people. Lissa sat back, her ears moving through positions Marcus couldn't quite interpret. She was silent for nearly a minute, unusual for her, and he could almost see her reorganizing her understanding of human behavior through this new information. Dr. Webb, this changes my entire comprehension of human social structures. How so? I had assumed your bonding customs were similar to ours, just expressed differently. But if emotional connection and reproduction can occur independently, then human relationships are far more complex than I understood. The variables multiply exponentially. Welcome to human sociology. We've been trying to figure it out ourselves for millennia. Lissa laughed. That sound like wind chimes that Marcus had learned meant genuine amusement rather than the polite social noise humans might make. Then her ears perked up again with that characteristic intensity that meant another question was forming. So human reproduction requires physical contact, emotional bonding for optimal outcomes, and mutual consent to create offspring. That's a reasonable summary, yes. Lissa's ears tilted forward, her expression shifting into what Marcus recognized as excited realization. Is this how humans reproduce? Can I try? The laboratory's ambient noise seemed to cut out as Marcus's brain attempted to process what she just asked. His face went through several colors in rapid succession, pale to red to something that probably approximated purple. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. No sound emerged. This is an educational context, he finally managed to stammer, but the damage was done. The other Velari researchers in the laboratory had all stopped working, their attention snapping to the conversation with such synchronized precision that Marcus knew they'd been listening. One researcher dropped a sample container, the crash of breaking material loud in the sudden silence. Another made a sound like someone had physically struck her. A third's ears had gone completely rigid, locked in a position Marcus had never seen before. Lissa looked confused by everyone's reaction. Did I phrase the question incorrectly? I am interested in understanding the process experientially to better comprehend the mechanisms you described. Is direct observation not appropriate for educational purposes? Lissa, that's not how. Humans don't. There's a significant difference between explaining biology and actually. Marcus was very aware he was not forming coherent sentences, but his brain seemed to have shorted out somewhere around, "Can I try?" The senior Velari researcher, an older female named Tessa whose ears showed silver streaks of age, approached their station with an expression Marcus couldn't read. She spoke rapidly in the Velari language, too fast for Marcus's translation implant to fully capture, but he caught enough to understand the situation had just become very complicated in ways he didn't fully understand. Lissa responded in their language, her tone confused, and Tessa's ears went through a series of positions that Marcus's limited cultural training suggested indicated shock followed by something like dismay. "Dr. Webb," Tessa said in careful human standard, "do you understand what researcher Lissa has just initiated?" A very awkward misunderstanding. "No, a consort petition." "A what?" "Her verbal inquiry about participating in your reproductive process, delivered in front of witnesses, constitutes formal courtship initiation under traditional Velari law. She has petitioned for consort status." Marcus felt the laboratory floor shift beneath him in a way that had nothing to do with the station's artificial gravity. That's not what she meant. This was a biology lesson. She was asking an educational question about reproductive mechanics, not making any kind of actual. Under Velari law, the interpretation is bound by the words spoken and the context of witness observation. Intent is evaluated by oath censors, but the verbal petition itself has been formally lodged. Lissa was looking between Marcus and Tessa with growing alarm, her ears shifting through positions that suggested she was beginning to realize her innocent question had triggered something she hadn't intended. "I did not mean to initiate formal protocols," she said quietly. "I was curious about experiential understanding of the process Dr. Webb described. I did not intend courtship petition." "Nevertheless," Tessa said, her tone gentle but firm, "the words were spoken and witnessed. This must now follow proper legal channels. Dr. Webb, you will need to consult with your superiors. Researcher Lissa, your family must be notified. This has become a matter that extends beyond personal choice." Marcus stood there, his anatomy lesson somehow having transformed into an interstellar incident, and wondered how explaining cardiovascular redundancy had led to this moment. Lissa's ears had drooped in what he now recognized as mortification, and he felt a surge of protectiveness mixed with his own confusion. "Lissa, I know you didn't mean. I have disrupted proper protocols and caused diplomatic complication through impulsive inquiry," she said, her voice smaller than he'd ever heard it. "I apologize, Dr. Webb. I will submit to family judgment regarding appropriate resolution." She left the laboratory quickly, followed by Tessa and two other Velari researchers. The remaining personnel returned to their work with carefully neutral expressions that Marcus suspected hid significant opinions about what they just witnessed. Marcus stood alone at his workstation, the holographic diagrams of human anatomy still floating in the air, and tried to figure out how his life had just become exponentially more complicated than cardiovascular redundancy could ever explain. His comm unit chimed. Commander Akoi's face appeared, her expression promising that his day was about to get even worse. "Dr. Webb, I need you in my office. Now, we need to discuss what the hell just happened in your laboratory." Marcus closed the anatomical displays and headed for what he suspected would be one of the most uncomfortable conversations of his career. Behind him, The Velari researchers whispered among themselves in their musical language, and Marcus didn't need translation to know he'd just become the subject of station-wide gossip that would probably reach both homeworlds before the day ended. Perfect, just perfect. Commander Akoi's office reflected her personality, efficient, no-nonsense, decorated with commendations from military service most people tried to forget. She'd fought in the colony wars, commanded troops against Velari forces, and lost friends to their weapons. The fact that she now ran a joint research station spoke to either remarkable personal growth or the kind of pragmatism that values peace over holding grudges. Marcus suspected it was both. "Sit," she said without preamble. He sat. "I've received 3 formal communications in the last 20 minutes, one from Velari Station Command, one from their embassy, one from someone whose title translates as Lineage Arbiter, which I'm told is extremely significant." She leaned back in her chair, studying him. Care to explain how a routine training session became a diplomatic situation requiring arbiters? Marcus summarized the anatomy lesson and Lissa's question, trying to convey the innocent confusion that had led to the disaster. Akoi listened without interrupting, her expression neutral until he finished. "So you explained human reproduction, and she asked if she could participate in the process." "Yes, ma'am. But she meant it as an educational inquiry about observing or understanding the mechanisms, not as an actual." "Doesn't matter what she meant. Matters how it was received by Velari witnesses under their legal framework." Akoi pulled up documents on her display. "I've been reading background materials since the alert started. The consort petition is ancient tradition, predates their modern government structure. Among the Velari, verbal inquiry about participating in another being's reproductive process, when witnessed by multiple observers, initiates formal courtship protocol." That seems like an easy way to accidentally start courtships, which is why most Velari are extremely careful about phrasing questions around reproduction. It's culturally ingrained to avoid that specific verbal construction. Researcher Lissa violated her own cultural norms, probably because she was thinking in human conceptual frameworks after your explanation. Marcus rubbed his temples. "Can't we just issue a clarification? State that it was a misunderstanding, no courtship was intended, everyone moves on." That's option 1. But according to the Lineage Arbiter's communication, Lissa comes from a politically significant family. Her genetic line has historical importance in Velari society. If a consort petition from someone in her lineage is rejected or dismissed as misunderstanding, it reflects poorly on her family's honor. So rejecting it causes problems. Yes, but accepting it causes different problems. Akoi pulled up more files. If you formalize the petition, you gain certain rights within her family structure, access to restricted social circles, political influence, and most significantly, clearance to Velari research facilities that have been closed to human observers. Marcus felt the conversation shifting into territory he didn't like. "You're thinking about strategic advantage." "I'm thinking about the fact that we've been trying to gain access to certain Velari genetic archives for 2 years without success. If you had consort status with Lissa's family, those archives would become accessible. The intelligence value alone. I'm not going to exploit an innocent misunderstanding for intelligence gathering." "I'm not asking you to exploit anything. I'm laying out the full picture of what you're deciding." Akoi's expression softened slightly. "Marcus, I know your history. I know what you lost during the wars. If this situation is too complicated given that background, I'll find a way to extract you diplomatically. But you need to understand the stakes before making that choice." The door chimed. "Doctor." Chen entered without waiting for acknowledgement, her expression grim. Chen was the station's xenoanthropology specialist, someone who'd spent decades studying Velari culture. "Commander, we have a problem. The oath sensors have been deployed." "Already?" Akoi looked surprised. Lissa's family moved fast. They've requested immediate verification of the petition's emotional foundation. Dr. Webb, you're being summoned for sensor evaluation. Marcus felt cold. What do these sensors actually do? They read neural patterns, analyze emotional states, verify sincerity. The Velari use them in all significant social contracts. They'll scan both you and Lissa, determine if there's legitimate emotional foundation for the petition, or if it was purely academic confusion. And if it was purely academic, then the petition is void. Lissa's family saves face by demonstrating she was acting from genuine intellectual curiosity rather than inappropriate impulse, and everyone moves on. Chen paused. But if the censors detect any emotional foundation beyond professional interest, then the petition is considered valid, Akoy finished. Which brings us back to the choice you need to make. Marcus thought about Lissa, her endless questions, her genuine fascination with everything she encountered, the way her ears broadcast her emotions before she could filter them. He'd been teaching her for 6 months. Had he developed feelings beyond professional respect? He honestly didn't know. What happens if I refuse the censor evaluation? Diplomatic incident, Chen said bluntly. Velari law requires consent for oath censor use, but refusing evaluation of a formal consort petition is considered an insult to the petitioner's lineage. Given current political tensions, it could destabilize the entire cooperation framework we've spent years building. So my choices are: submit to neural evaluation, potentially validate a petition I never intended, and navigate whatever political mess follows, or refuse evaluation, insult Lissa's family, and damage human-Velari relations. That's the situation, Akoy confirmed. Marcus stood, pacing to the window where he could see the moon rotating below. Somewhere on that moon, Velari and human teams were working together on resource surveys that had seemed impossible 3 years ago. The station itself represented thousands of hours of cooperation, compromise, and genuine attempts to move past the war. "I'll do the evaluation," he said finally, "but I want to speak with Lissa first. If we're going to have our neural patterns analyzed for emotional content, I'd like to understand what she's thinking." "That can be arranged," Chen said. "Though be aware her family's representatives will likely be present. This has moved beyond private conversation." "Of course it has." Marcus turned back to face them. "Anything else I should know before walking into what sounds like an alien courtship tribunal?" Akoy exchanged glances with Chen. "One thing. There have been coded communications detected from known extremist groups, the ones who never accepted the peace." Marcus felt his combat medic instincts activate. "They're mobilizing." "Possibly. A human gaining consort status in a prominent Velari family would be symbolic in ways that some people would find threatening. Station security has been alerted, but you should be aware that this situation has visibility beyond just diplomatic circles." "Fantastic. Accidental courtship with a side of potential assassination." "Welcome to frontier diplomacy," Akoy said dryly. "Dismissed, Dr. Webb and Marcus. Try not to cause any additional diplomatic incidents before the censor evaluation." Marcus left the office, his mind spinning through implications he hadn't fully considered. The station corridor, the oath censors were going to be very interesting. He met Lissa in a neutral conference room that had been set up for the evaluation. She was accompanied by 3 Velari he didn't recognize, family representatives, judging by the formal patterns on their clothing. She looked smaller than usual, her ears held in a position that suggested profound discomfort. "Dr. Webb," one of the representatives said in careful human standard, "I am Counselor Thane, Lissa's lineage arbiter. We appreciate your willingness to undergo oath censor evaluation. The process will be uncomfortable but not harmful." "I understand. Can I speak with Lissa privately first?" "That is irregular. I'm not participating until I talk to her alone." Marcus kept his voice calm but firm. 5 minutes, private conversation. Thane's ears went through several positions before he nodded curtly. 5 minutes. We will be outside. The representatives left. Marcus and Lissa stood facing each other in the now quiet room. I am so sorry, she said immediately. I did not understand the implications of my phrasing. I was thinking in human conceptual frameworks, and I forgot proper Velari protocols for discussing reproduction. I have dishonored my family and complicated your position through carelessness. Lissa, look at me. He waited until her eyes met his. This isn't your fault. You were asking questions the way you always do, directly, honestly, without pretense. That's one of the things He paused, realizing he was about to say something significant. One of the things I value about working with you. Her ears perked up slightly. You do not resent my constant questioning. Sometimes it's exhausting. Mostly it's refreshing. You approach everything like it's a puzzle worth solving, and you're not afraid to ask the uncomfortable questions others avoid. This particular uncomfortable question has caused considerable difficulty. Yeah, it has. Marcus moved closer, his medic training making him notice details. Her elevated heart rate visible in the pulse point at her throat, the slight tremor in her hands. But we're going to figure it out. Together. Starting with this oath sensor evaluation. The sensors will show my emotional state was genuine. I was not consciously initiating courtship protocols, but... She hesitated. I have developed regard for you that extends beyond academic interest. The sensors will detect this. It will validate the petition legally even though I did not intend formal courtship. Marcus absorbed this information. You have feelings for me. Feelings is imprecise human term, but yes. I find your company valuable beyond educational context. I experience satisfaction in your presence. I think about you when we are not together. These are early-stage bonding indicators among my people. And you didn't say anything. You are my teacher. The professional dynamic made personal acknowledgement inappropriate. I was content to experience these feelings without acting on them. But now they will be exposed through sensor evaluation, and you will be forced to respond to sentiments I never intended to burden you with. Marcus realized his own heart rate had elevated. His hands had moved to clasp hers without conscious decision. Lissa, I need to tell you something before we do this evaluation. Yes. I've been thinking of you as a student and colleague because that felt safe. Professional boundaries, appropriate distance, all the things that keep situations uncomplicated. He squeezed her hands gently. But if I'm being honest, and apparently we're being very honest right now, you're the first person since I lost my family who makes me feel like connection is possible again. Your questions, your curiosity, the way you get excited about understanding new concepts. Somewhere along the way, you became important to me in ways I wasn't letting myself acknowledge. Lissa's ears had gone completely still, locked in a position of intense focus. You have developed reciprocal feelings. I think I have, which is going to make this sensor evaluation very complicated. Because it will validate the petition legally and bind us in formal courtship protocols neither of us planned for. Exactly. Marcus released her hands, though part of him didn't want to. So we need to decide right now, before those sensors tell everyone what we're apparently too stubborn to admit to ourselves. Do we want this? Not because of legal obligations or political pressure, but because we actually choose it. Lissa's ears tilted through several positions as she processed this. You are asking if we should honor my accidental petition not as obligation but as genuine desire. Yes. Because once those sensors confirm mutual feelings, we'll be caught in legal frameworks and political calculations. But right now, in this room, it's just us. So I'm asking, Lissa, do you want to explore what's between us? Not as research subject and teacher, not as diplomatic gesture, but as two people who apparently care about each other more than either of us realized. She stepped closer, her luminous eyes studying his face with that characteristic intensity. My family will have expectations. Your superiors will have strategic interests. Conservative elements in both our species will object strenuously. The complications are considerable. That's not an answer. The answer is yes. Her ears perked forward with unmistakable certainty. I want to explore this bond. I want to understand not just human biology but you specifically. I want to continue asking uncomfortable questions and receiving honest answers. She paused, then smiled. I want to try as I originally asked, though I now understand the question better than I did. Marcus felt something tight in his chest release. Then let's tell the censors the truth. We'll deal with the political fallout together. Together, she agreed. Though I should warn you, my family's courtship expectations are extensive and ritualized. And I should warn you, humans are terrible at following ritual protocols without asking why. Then we will confuse everyone equally. Her smile widened. I find that acceptable. The oath censor evaluation took place with Lissa's family representatives, Commander Akoy, Dr. Chen, and several Velari technical specialists present. The censors themselves were elegant devices that rested against their temples, connected by threads of technology that looked more like art than equipment. The technician explained the process in both languages. The sensors will read neural patterns, emotional resonance, sincerity of intention. You will experience awareness of each other's emotional states. It is not mind reading but emotional truth sharing. Do you both consent? I consent, Lissa said formally. I consent, Marcus echoed. The sensors activated with a soft pulse of warmth. For a moment nothing happened. Then awareness bloomed. Not thoughts, not words, but emotional texture. He felt Lissa's presence like a melody at the edge of hearing. Anxious excitement mixed with hope, mixed with fear of disappointing, everyone mixed with something that felt unmistakably like affection directed at him. And she would be feeling his emotional state in return. Concern for her well-being, protective instincts, curiosity about where this could lead, and beneath it all, the growing recognition that his feelings had evolved far past professional interest into something that actually mattered. The technician studied readouts that Marcus couldn't interpret. Counselor Thane leaned forward, his ears moving through positions that suggested he was reading information from the displays. Commander Akoy maintained careful neutrality, but Marcus caught the slightest hint of satisfaction in her expression. The evaluation is complete, the technician announced. Emotional foundation is verified as genuine on both sides. The petition is valid under traditional law. Dr. Webb and researcher Lissa have entered formal consort candidacy. The room erupted in reactions. Lissa's family representatives began speaking rapidly in their language. Akoy immediately started taking calls on her comm. Dr. Chen was making notes with the intensity of someone documenting history as it happened. Through it all, Marcus felt Lissa's emotional presence steady and sure, and let it anchor him as their personal moment became public spectacle. Counselor Thane approached them. Dr. Webb, you now hold provisional status within our family lineage. This grants certain rights and obligations. You will receive formal documentation, but I must inform you that your safety becomes our responsibility. We will assign protection. Is protection necessary? Recent communications suggest extremist elements may respond poorly to this development. We take threats seriously. The next hours blurred together. Meetings with human command. Introductions to more of Lissa's family. Security briefings that made Marcus feel like he was back in combat zones. Through it all, he remained aware of Lissa through the oath censor connection. Her emotional state ranging from overwhelmed to determined, to occasionally amused by the chaos they'd created. It was late station night when they finally found themselves alone in a secure observation lounge, the moon turning slowly beyond the windows. Your earlier question makes more sense now, Marcus said quietly. Which question? I ask many. Can I try? You were asking about human connection in the broadest sense, not just reproduction but the whole package, emotional bonding, physical presence, building something together. Yes. Human connection seemed mysterious when viewed from Velari framework. Now I begin to understand its complexity. And now we're connected in ways neither of us planned. Do you regret it? Her ears tilted with anxiety. No. He took her hand again, the gesture becoming natural. It's terrifying and complicated and probably going to cause a dozen more diplomatic incidents. But no, I don't regret it. She leaned against him, the gesture tentative but genuine. I am glad my impulsive question led to this outcome, even if the path was chaotic. That's one word for it. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the moon rotate until Marcus's comm chimed with urgent priority. He checked it and felt his blood run cold. Security alert. Potential hostile action detected. All personnel to secure locations. Lissa felt his fear through the bond. What is wrong? Someone's making a move. We need to get to a secure area. Now. They ran through corridors that had activated emergency protocols, lights shifting to alert status. Security teams moved with practiced efficiency. Marcus's combat medic training kicked in, calculating routes and threat vectors automatically. The explosion happened 3 corridors away, close enough to feel the shockwave, far enough that they weren't in immediate danger. But it was clearly just the opening move. They're trying to destabilize the station, Marcus said, pulling Lissa toward a reinforced shelter. Classic extremist playbook: create chaos, strike during confusion. They are targeting you. Probably. Removing me before the bond solidifies removes the symbolic threat. They reached the shelter where other personnel were gathering. Velari and human security teams coordinated defense with the kind of seamless cooperation that would have been impossible 3 years ago. Commander Akoi was already there, directing response operations. Dr. Webb, you need to stay here while we... Another explosion, closer this time. The shelter's reinforced walls held, but the message was clear. Someone had penetrated station security with sophisticated planning. Lissa's family representatives arrived, their expressions grim. Counselor Thane has been injured in the initial blast. The attackers are targeting lineage representatives as well as Dr. Webb. Marcus felt Lissa's distress through the bond, her concern for her family mixing with fear for his safety. He made a decision that his rational mind knew was stupid, but his instincts insisted was necessary. I'm going out there. Absolutely not, Akoi said firmly. Commander, I'm a combat medic. There are wounded people who need treatment. And if the attackers are after me, keeping me locked in here while they target everyone else is tactically wrong. It's also wrong to let them kill their primary target. Then give me security escort and let me do my job. People are hurt. I can help. Akoi studied him for a long moment, then nodded curtly. 2-person escort. You stay with them, you follow their orders, and if they tell you to retreat, you retreat. Clear, clear. Lissa grabbed his arm, her fear palpable through the bond. This is dangerous. Yes, but it's who I am. I can't hide while people need medical help. Then I am coming with you. I'm also trained in emergency medical response. Lissa, we are bonded now. You do not make unilateral decisions about danger. Her ears were locked in a position of absolute determination. We face threats together. There was no time to argue. Marcus grabbed his medical kit. Lissa collected equipment from the shelter's emergency supplies, and they moved out with their security escort. The corridors were chaos, smoke, damaged sections, personnel helping wounded toward shelter. Marcus fell into the familiar rhythm of triage, his training overriding fear as he assessed injuries and directed treatment. Lissa worked beside him with focused efficiency, her medical knowledge filling gaps in his understanding of Velari physiology. They found Counselor Thane in a damaged section, pinned under debris with a human security officer who'd been shielding him. Marcus and Lissa worked together to stabilize both, their movements coordinated by months of working side by side and amplified by the emotional awareness the oath sensors provided. The attackers are moving towards central life support, Thane gasped out. They intend to take the entire station hostage. Marcus relayed this to security while continuing treatment. The response was immediate, teams moving to intercept, reinforcements deploying to critical systems. They were loading Thane onto a medical transport when Marcus heard it, the distinctive sound of a weapon charging. His combat instinct screamed warning a split second before his conscious mind processed the threat. He moved without thinking, throwing himself toward Lissa as the shot fired. He felt the impact, felt pain explode across his back as he took the hit meant for her, and then he was falling with her voice calling his name through both ears and oath sensor connection. The security team took down the attacker. More teams arrived, securing the area. But Marcus's awareness was narrowing, his medic training cataloging his own injuries with detached precision. Shrapnel in his back, probably punctured lung, definitely serious but possibly survivable with immediate treatment. Lissa was above him, her hands already working with medical equipment, her emotional state flooding through the bond, terror and determination and anguish, an absolute refusal to let him die. Her medical training fought her fear, and her fear fought her training, and Marcus felt all of it as she worked to save his life. "Stay with me," she said, her voice breaking. "You do not get to die protecting me. That is not how this works. Didn't ask permission," he managed to gasp out. "Humans are terrible at following protocols." Her hands were steady even as her voice shook, including basic survival protocols. "You would have done the same." "Yes, which is why we are both idiots." He wanted to laugh, but breathing was getting difficult. The medical transport arrived with a full emergency team. They loaded him on with practiced efficiency, while Lissa refused to leave his side, explaining his injuries in rapid technical language that would have impressed him if he weren't busy trying to stay conscious. "The oath sensor connection is helping me monitor his status," she told the medical team. "I can feel his pain threshold. He is approaching shock. Prioritize respiratory support." Marcus felt consciousness sliding away, but held on long enough to feel Lissa's presence through the bond, steady and fierce, and absolutely refusing to let him go. It was the last thing he was aware of before darkness took him. Marcus woke in medical to find Lissa asleep in a chair beside his bed, her hand carefully wrapped around his, in what he recognized as the human gesture of comfort she'd learned. The oath sensor connection was still active, letting him feel her emotional state even in sleep, exhaustion mixed with relief mixed with lingering fear. He shifted slightly, and pain reminded him why he was here. His back felt like someone had used it for shrapnel storage, which wasn't far from the truth. But he was breathing without assistance, which meant the lung had been repaired. Alive then. That was a good start. Lissa's ears twitched, responding to his movement before she fully woke. Her eyes opened, and for a moment she just stared at him. Then her emotional state flooded the bond. Relief so intense it was almost painful, joy mixed with anger mixed with residual terror. "You are awake." Her voice was carefully controlled, but he felt everything she wasn't saying through the connection. "The medical team said you would recover fully. The shrapnel damaged your lung but missed your heart by centimeters. You were very lucky. Lucky you were there to treat me. Lucky I was present for you to nearly die protecting." Her ears flattened against her head in anger that he felt echoed through the bond. "What you did was foolish and dangerous and completely unnecessary. The shot would have killed you. And if it had killed you, what then? I experience your pain through the bond, Marcus. I felt every moment of your injury. Do you understand how terrifying that was?" He reached up to touch her face, and she leaned into the gesture despite her anger. "I'm sorry. Combat medic instincts. See threat to someone I care about, move to intercept. It's not very sophisticated. It is very human." She took his hand in both of hers. "And it has created significant political consequences." "Of course it has. What now?" The image of a human protecting a Velari with his own body, nearly dying for her, has been broadcast across both our territories. The extremists who organized the attack have been captured and their conspiracy exposed. But more significantly, Public opinion has shifted. Moderate voices in both species are calling for the alliance to strengthen, using our bond as evidence that genuine connection is possible. So my getting shot actually helped. Please do not make it sound like a strategic choice. You simply did what humans do, act on instinct and emotion without calculating optimal outcomes. You say that like it's a bad thing. It is terrifying. It is also. She paused, and through the bond he felt her emotional complexity. It is also beautiful. Velari courtship is calculated, planned, built on careful genetic analysis and strategic family positioning. What you did was none of those things. It was simply genuine caring expressed through action. I am not accustomed to this level of sincerity. Get used to it. I'm terrible at hiding my feelings, especially now that you can feel them directly through this connection. She smiled, her first real smile since he'd woken. Yes, I can feel your relief at being alive, your concern for my well-being, your residual pain from the injuries, and underneath all of it. She tilted her head. Something that feels like contentment despite the circumstances. Being near you feels right, even in medical with a punctured lung. That probably says something about my priorities. It says you are bonding properly. The oath sensors verify emotional truth, but they also deepen connection. The longer we wear them, the stronger our bond becomes. How long do we wear them? Until formal marriage ceremony if we choose that path. Or indefinitely if we prefer extended courtship. The sensors can remain active for years. So I'm going to feel your emotions indefinitely. And I will feel yours. This troubles you. Marcus considered it. The idea of someone having constant access to his emotional state should have been disturbing. His privacy, his ability to hide feelings, all stripped away. But through the bond he could feel Lissa's presence, her concern, her affection, her complicated mix of feelings about their situation, and it didn't feel invasive. It felt like connection. No, he said finally, it doesn't trouble me, though you're going to get very familiar with my anxiety about medical procedures and my irrational irritation at station coffee. And you will experience my frustration when people refuse to answer my questions and my excitement when learning new concepts. We will share everything. Everything, he agreed. Commander Akoi visited an hour later, her expression carefully neutral. Dr. Webb, glad to see you conscious. Your heroics were noted by both species leadership. You're being awarded commendations from both governments, which is unprecedented. I wasn't trying to be heroic, ma'am. I was trying to keep Lissa alive. Same result. The political impact has been significant. The extremists who attacked the station have been exposed as a coordinated conspiracy reaching into both governments. Their capture has actually strengthened moderate factions. Your bond with researcher Lissa is being held up as proof that genuine cooperation is possible. So, our accidental relationship is now political symbolism. Welcome to frontier diplomacy. Akoi's expression softened slightly. For what it's worth, Marcus, you did good. Not just the heroics, but the whole situation. You turned a cultural misunderstanding into something that might actually help both our species move forward. I just answered her questions honestly. Exactly. Sometimes honesty is the most radical political act available. Over the following weeks, as Marcus recovered, the situation continued evolving. The gate network negotiations that had been stalled for months suddenly accelerated, with both sides citing the Marcus-Lissa bond as evidence that deeper cooperation was possible. Access to previously restricted research facilities opened up. Joint scientific programs expanded. And through it all, Marcus and Lissa continued building their relationship, learning to navigate the oath sensor connection that let them share emotions while discovering each other as individuals beyond the roles they'd started with. Lissa still asked endless questions, but now Marcus could feel the curiosity driving them, could sense when her inquiries came from genuine confusion versus when she was pushing boundaries to see how he'd respond. And she could feel his reactions, his patience, his occasional frustration, his underlying affection that grew stronger the more time they spent together. "I have a question," she said one evening as they sat in the observation lounge watching the stars. "Of course you do. This bond we have built, it began with my misunderstanding of human reproduction, but it has become genuine connection verified by oath sensors and strengthened through shared experience. Does the origin matter if the result is real?" Marcus pulled her closer, feeling through the bond her need for reassurance. "The origin is a great story we'll probably never tell our families the full details about. But no, it doesn't matter. What matters is that we chose to make it real. Even though I accidentally initiated courtship protocols while trying to understand human biology, especially because of that. You were being yourself, curious, direct, unfiltered. That's who I'm bonded to. If you'd been calculated and careful, we might never have gotten here. So my impulsiveness was actually beneficial. Don't let it go to your head. You're still going to accidentally cause diplomatic incidents with uncomfortable questions. And you will continue to protect people without calculating optimal survival probability first. We're both disasters in our own ways, but disasters that function well together." She tilted her ears perked up with delight. "Does this mean you will explain human cultural practices I find confusing?" "Unfortunately, yes." "Excellent. I have compiled a list of 372 concepts requiring clarification." "Of course you have." The formal bonding ceremony took place 3 months later, after Marcus had fully recovered and political tensions had stabilized. It was a hybrid affair, combining Velari genetic bonding traditions with human marriage customs, witnessed by representatives from both species and broadcast to audiences across multiple worlds. Marcus stood in formal dress uniform, feeling absurdly nervous despite the oath sensor connection letting him feel Lissa's steady presence. She entered in ceremonial attire that combined traditional Velari patterns with elements honoring human aesthetic. And through the bond he felt her joy mixed with determination, mixed with love that had grown from curious questions into something neither of them had planned for but both now chose completely. The ceremony itself blurred together, ritual words in both languages, exchange of genetic markers that Velari tradition required, exchange of rings that human custom valued, oath sensor verification that their bond was genuine and freely chosen. What Marcus remembered most clearly was the moment when the officiant, a Velari elder who'd fought in the wars and a human chaplain who'd lost family to Velari weapons, jointly declared them bonded under the laws of both peoples. Through the oath sensor, he felt Lissa's emotional state spike with happiness so intense it took his breath away, and knew she was feeling his identical reaction through her own connection. "I have a question," she whispered as they stood together before the assembled witnesses. "Now," he whispered back, "now, is this how humans form permanent bonds? By choosing each other despite every logical reason not to?" He laughed, feeling joy bubble through the bond in both directions. "Yes, that's exactly how we do it." "Then I am glad I asked uncomfortable questions about reproduction. It led to the most important answer I have ever received." "Which is?" "That connection is worth every complication it brings. That genuine caring transcends careful calculation. That sometimes the best outcomes emerge from the most awkward beginnings." Marcus kissed her, a human gesture she'd learned meant affection and commitment and promise of continued partnership. The assembled witnesses applauded, Velari making their musical chiming sounds, humans clapping with boisterous enthusiasm. As they left the ceremony together, oath sensors still connecting them in constant emotional awareness, Marcus reflected on the journey from anatomy lesson to diplomatic incident to genuine love. Lissa was right, the complications had been considerable, but the result was worth every moment of chaos. "I have another question," Lissa said as they headed toward their shared quarters for the first time as bonded partners. "Only one. For now, will you teach me more about human bonding practices? I wish to understand all aspects of our connection. All aspects? Everything. I am very thorough in my research. Through the bond, he felt her curiosity mixed with nervousness, mixed with anticipation, mixed with love. He sent back his own emotional response, affection and desire and joy and complete certainty that he'd found exactly the right person to spend his life answering questions for. Then let's continue the lesson where we left off, he said. Though fair warning, practical demonstrations of human bonding are considerably more complex than theoretical explanations. I prefer hands-on learning. Her ears tilted forward with excitement, and I have many questions about optimal techniques. Of course you do. They entered their quarters together, the door closing behind them, and Marcus thought about all the lectures he'd given on human biology, all the clinical explanations and anatomical diagrams. None of it had prepared him for this, for genuine connection built from accidental questions and verified by technology that made lies impossible and strengthened truth into something permanent. But then, the best lessons were always the ones you learned by living them, and Lissa had many, many more questions.